The distress signal echoed through the void of space, a desperate plea that had been transmitting for 3 standard galactic days. Commander Vexara of the Zalathi Commonwealth stood on the bridge of their diplomatic vessel, her 4 arms trembling as she watched the Krillian warships systematically destroy another of their colony worlds. "Commander, the outer settlements on Theta 9 have gone dark," reported her communications officer, his voice barely a whisper. The Zalathi were a peaceful species, evolved on a garden world where the greatest predator was no larger than what humans would call a house cat. Their bodies were slender, almost fragile, with translucent skin that showed their circulatory system like delicate artwork beneath the surface. Vexara closed all 6 of her eyes, trying to steady herself. "How many?" 7 million souls, Commander. The Krillians show no mercy." The Krillians were everything the Zalathi were not. Bred for war on a harsh world of eternal storms and volcanic activity, they stood 3 meters tall, covered in natural armor plating that could deflect most energy weapons. Their empire had been expanding for centuries, consuming peaceful civilizations like a plague across the galaxy. "Have any of the Galactic Council species responded to our distress call?" Vexara asked, though she already knew the answer. "The Altarians sent their regrets. The Vendorians claim neutrality. The Quellans—" The officer paused. "The Quellans say we should surrender and accept integration into the Krillian Empire." A bitter laugh escaped Vexara's throat. Integration meant slavery at best, extinction at worst. The Krillians viewed other species as either useful tools or obstacles to be removed. "Commander," the tactical officer's voice cut through the despair. "We're receiving a response to our distress signal. It's from the quarantine zone." Every being on the bridge froze. The quarantine zone was a region of space that the Galactic Council had marked as forbidden territory 70 years ago. It contained a single star system with 9 planets, the third of which was classified as a Class 12 death world. The inhabitants had achieved faster-than-light travel only recently by galactic standards, but their first contact with the Council had resulted in the immediate quarantine. "Put it through," Vexara ordered, her voice barely audible. The main screen flickered to life, showing a being that made even the battle-hardened Zalathi bridge crew step back. It was bipedal, standing roughly 2 meters tall, with forward-facing predator eyes that seemed to pierce through the screen. Its skin was a strange brownish pink, with no natural armor or obvious defensive features. Yet something about its presence radiated danger. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Fleet." The creature spoke in perfect galactic standard, though its mouth movements didn't quite match the translation. "We received your distress call. We understand you're under attack by the Krillian Empire." Vexara found her voice. "Yes, Admiral. We are desperate. Our people are being slaughtered. The Council won't help. We had nowhere else to turn." The human's expression changed slightly. What their species apparently called a frown. "The Galactic Council is allowing genocide?" "They fear the Krillians," Vexara admitted. "Their fleet is the strongest in known space. No one wants to provoke them." Admiral Chen was quiet for a moment, and Vexara noticed something unsettling. The human was perfectly still, like a predator deciding whether to strike. When she spoke again, her voice carried something that made Vexara's skin crawl despite the human's apparent sympathy. "Send us all tactical data on the Krillian fleet positions, their ship specifications, and the locations of their occupied worlds. Also include data on your surviving population centers and refugee ships." "Admiral, I must warn you," Vexara felt obligated to say. "The Krillians have over 3,000 warships. Their technology is—" "Commander Vexara," the human interrupted, and now there was definitely something predatory in her expression. "You called for help. We're answering. Send the data." Vexara gestured to her officers, who began transmitting everything they had. As the data streamed across space, she asked, "Why? Why would you help us? The Council says your species is dangerous, that you come from a world so hostile that we shouldn't exist," Admiral Chen finished. "They're probably right. Earth is a death world. We evolved surrounded by predators, disasters, diseases, and constant conflict. We learned to be dangerous because we had to be. But we also learned something else." "What?" Vexara asked. "We learned to protect those who can't protect themselves. We learned that strength without compassion is just brutality. And we learned that sometimes the human's eyes seem to harden. Sometimes you have to be the monster that other monsters fear." The transmission of data completed, and Admiral Chen looked at something off-screen. Her expression grew darker. 3,000 ships, 47 conquered worlds, over 15 billion enslaved or dead. She looked back at Vexara. "We'll need 3 days to mobilize our full fleet. Can you hold out that long?" I don't know," Vexara admitted. "Our last defensive line is falling. We have maybe 10 million people on refugee ships, but the Krillians are hunting them." "Send those ships to these coordinates." Admiral Chen transmitted a location just outside the quarantine zone. "We'll provide cover." "How many ships can you send?" Vexara asked, desperate hope creeping into her voice. The human's expression was unreadable. "All of them." "All? How many is—" "Every combat-capable vessel in human space, Commander. The 1st through 7th Fleets, the Colonial Defense Forces, the Mars Expeditionary Group." The Admiral paused. "Even the old war museums are being refitted. When humanity goes to war, we don't do it halfway. But your own defense. Our world has survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcanoes, and nuclear war. We'll manage." Admiral Chen stood up, and Vexara realized the human was wearing some kind of form-fitting uniform that looked almost like a second skin. 3 days, Commander. Keep your people alive for 3 more days." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. "Did they just say they're mobilizing their entire species for us?" the navigation officer whispered. Vexara stared at the blank screen, remembering the old stories about Deathworlders. The Council's reports said humans were insane, that they would strap themselves to controlled explosions just to reach their moon, that they would poison themselves with radiation to cure diseases, that they considered sports where they could die to be entertainment. "Commander," the tactical officer interrupted her thoughts. "Long-range sensors are detecting a massive Krillian fleet movement. They're heading for our last colony." "How many?" 500 warships, Commander. They mean to finish us." Vexara straightened all 4 of her arms. 3 days. They just had to survive 3 days. "Send out the evacuation order. Every ship, every shuttle, every life pod. We run, we hide, we survive. The Deathworlders are coming." "Do you really think they can stand against the Krillians?" her second-in-command asked quietly. Vexara thought about those predator eyes, that perfectly still stance, the casual way the human had decided to mobilize an entire species for strangers. "I think," she said slowly, "that we're about to find out why the Council quarantined them." The Krillian fleet appeared on their sensors like a wave of death, their massive dreadnoughts bristling with weapons. The lead ship transmitted a message, and the brutal face of Warlord Krax filled their screen. "Zalathi scum," he growled, his 4 massive arms flexing. "You dare run from your fate? We are the apex of evolution. You are prey. Accept your place in the natural order." Vexara cut the transmission without responding. There was nothing to say. The Zalathi ships scattered in all directions, their smaller, faster vessels using every trick they knew to stay ahead of the hunters. For 3 days, they ran. The Krillians picked off stragglers, destroyed any ship too slow to escape. The refugee fleet dwindled from 10 million to 8 million, then 6 million. Vexara stopped counting after that. She couldn't bear to. On the morning of the third day, her sensor officer suddenly gasped. "Commander, something's happening at the rendezvous coordinates." On screen. The view shifted to show empty space. Then, one by one, ships began dropping out of hyperspace. But these weren't like any vessels in the Galactic Council database. Where most species built smooth, elegant ships that looked like works of art, these were brutal things. Angular, aggressive designs bristling with weapons, painted in stark grays and blacks. Some bore scars from previous battles, worn like badges of honor. They kept coming. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. Massive carriers that dwarfed even Krillian dreadnoughts. Sleek destroyers that moved like predators through space. Formations of fighters that numbered in the tens of thousands. "How many?" Vexara whispered. "I'm still counting," her officer replied, voice shaking. 4,000, 5,000. "Commander, they're still arriving." The human fleet formed up with military precision, creating a wall of metal and weapons between the refugee ships and their pursuers. The largest ship, a monster that must have been 10 kilometers long, transmitted a simple message on all frequencies. "Krillian Empire, this is Fleet Admiral Chen of the United Earth Defense Fleet. You are engaged in genocide. Cease all hostile actions immediately or face the consequences." The response from Warlord Krax was predictable. "Deathworlders, you dare threaten the Krillian Empire? We are the strong. You are nothing but another species to be crushed beneath our—" The transmission cut off as the human flagship fired a single shot. Not at the Krillian fleet, but past it, hitting an asteroid several thousand kilometers away. The asteroid didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist. "That was a warning shot," Admiral Chen's voice continued calmly. "You have 60 seconds to power down weapons and withdraw." The Zalathi bridge was silent. They had never seen a weapon that could simply delete matter from existence. "They're insane," someone whispered. Vexara found herself thinking that maybe, just maybe, insane was exactly what they needed. Warlord Krax stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Inevitable Conquest, his forearms crossed in defiance. The human ultimatum meant nothing. He had conquered 47 worlds, crushed species that had existed for millions of years. These Deathworlders, barely out of their gravity well for a century, dared to challenge him. "All ships, attack formation," he growled. "Show these primitives the price of defying the Krillian Empire." 3,000 Krillian warships surged forward, their energy weapons charging to full power. The most powerful fleet in known space moved as one, a tide of destruction that had never known defeat. The human fleet didn't move. They hung in space, waiting. "They're too scared to—" Krax's tactical officer began. Then the humans struck. It wasn't an attack in any sense the galaxy understood. There were no massive energy beams, no volleys of missiles, no dramatic charge. Instead, 10,000 small objects launched from the human fleet, each no larger than a Zalathi escape pod. They moved impossibly fast, accelerating at rates that should have torn them apart. "What are those?" Krax demanded. His answer came when the first one hit a Krillian destroyer. It didn't explode. It punched through the shields like they weren't there, through the armor, through the entire ship, and out the other side. The destroyer still functioned for exactly 3 seconds before secondary explosions tore it apart. "Kinetic weapons!" his science officer whispered in horror. "They're throwing pieces of metal at significant fractions of light speed." More impacts. Krillian ships, built to withstand energy weapons and antimatter warheads, were being torn apart by simple physics. Mass times acceleration equals force, and the humans had turned that basic equation into a weapon of terrifying efficiency. "Return fire!" Krax roared. The Krillian fleet's energy weapons lashed out, beams of coherent destruction that had melted cities and boiled oceans. They struck the human ships and were absorbed. The human vessels were covered in some kind of ablative armor that drank in the energy, dispersing it harmlessly. Impossible, someone breathed. Fleet Admiral Chen's face appeared on every screen in both fleets. Your energy weapons are based on exciting particles to release heat. Our ships are covered in a carbon nanotube mesh designed to dissipate heat across the entire hull. We developed it to survive atmospheric re-entry at combat speeds. She paused. Did you really think a species from a death world wouldn't know how to handle a little heat? The human fleet began to move. Not in the careful choreographed formations the Galactic Council used, but in something that looked almost chaotic. Ships rolled and twisted, accelerating and decelerating at rates that should have liquefied their crews. Small fighters dove between capital ships. Larger vessels used their own bulk as shields for smaller ones. They're not following any known tactical doctrine, Krax's tactical officer reported, panic creeping into his voice. On the Zalathi refugee ship, Commander Vexara watched in stunned amazement. How are they surviving those maneuvers? The gravitational forces alone. Her science officer ran calculations. Commander, if these readings are correct, the humans are pulling acceleration that would turn most species into paste. Their bodies must be incredibly resilient. The battle, if it could be called that, was becoming a slaughter. Human ships would appear where they shouldn't be, fire kinetic rounds or stranger weapons, then vanish before retaliation could arrive. One human destroyer played a deadly game, diving straight at a Krillian dreadnought, waiting until the last possible second before pulling up, causing the dreadnought's own weapons to strike the ships behind it. They're not fighting like soldiers, Vexara realized. They're fighting like predators, her second-in-command finished. They're hunting. And they were. The human fleet had split into wolf packs, isolating Krillian ships and tearing them apart. They used the debris fields as cover, turned the Krillians' own formations against them, exploited every weakness with ruthless efficiency. Then the real horror began. A new class of human ships moved forward, smaller than the battleships but somehow more menacing. They deployed clouds of something that sensors couldn't quite identify. The first Krillian ship to enter the cloud simply stopped. No explosions, no damage. It just stopped. Then pieces of it began to fall away, dissolving like sugar in rain. Nanomachines, Admiral Chen explained clinically. Programmed to disassemble anything with a Krillian alloy signature. Don't worry, they'll burn out in a few hours. We're not completely insane. Warlord Krax watched a third of his fleet dissolve into component atoms. This is not warfare. This is madness. No. Admiral Chen's voice was cold. This is human warfare. You see, Warlord, we've been killing each other for millions of years. We've gotten very, very good at it. But we've also learned restraint, rules, honor. Her image flickered, replaced by footage of burning Zalathi colonies. You showed none of that, so neither will we. The human flagship began to move. The 10-kilometer behemoth accelerated smoothly, its escorts peeling away. Krax watched it approach, his tactical display showing weapon signatures unlike anything in their database. Warlord, his weapons officer said quietly, I'm reading antimatter signatures, singularity generators, and things I can't even identify. That ship could crack a moon. Target everything on that monstrosity, Krax ordered. All weapons. Fire! 300 Krillian ships focused their fire on the human flagship. Energy beams, plasma torpedoes, antimatter missiles, everything they had. The space around the ship turned into a maelstrom of destruction. When the fire cleared, the flagship was untouched, surrounded by a shimmering bubble of twisted space. Gravity shields, someone whispered. They're bending space itself around their ship. The flagship returned fire once. A beam of pure white light lanced out, striking the inevitable conquest. Krax's shields, the most powerful in the Krillian fleet, held for exactly 1.7 seconds. Then the beam punched through, coring the ship like an apple. Krax and his bridge crew escaped in emergency pods, watching their flagship break apart. All around them, the Krillian fleet was dying. Not just losing, dying. The humans weren't accepting surrenders, weren't taking prisoners. Any ship that had participated in the genocide was marked for destruction. "Monster!" Krax raged at the human admiral. "You're no better than us!" Admiral Chen's response was calm. "You're right. We are monsters. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day. We survived ice ages, plagues, predators that could smell our fear, natural disasters that reshaped continents. We killed our own siblings for resources. We waged war over ideas, over colors, over lines on maps." She paused, and when she continued, her voice carried the weight of species-wide memory. "But we learned. We chose to be better. We created rules for war, protections for civilians, mercy for the defeated. We chained the monster warlord. And you? You made us unchain it." The systematic destruction continued. Human boarding parties, wearing powered armor that let them tear through Krillian warriors like paper, took ship after ship. The recordings that leaked later showed humans moving through corridors with inhuman speed, their tactics brutal and efficient. They used weapons that shouldn't exist, strategies that violated every principle of civilized warfare. On one ship, a single human soldier held off 50 Krillian warriors by releasing a chemical that caused their natural armor to become brittle. On another, human marines used sonic weapons that liquefied Krillian organs while leaving the ship intact. They turned the Krillians' own strength against them, used their pride as a weapon, exploited every biological weakness with scientific precision. "How?" Krax demanded from his escape pod. "How did you know our weaknesses?" "The same way we learned to kill everything else on our planet," Admiral Chen replied. "We studied you. Your armor is chitin-based, vulnerable to certain frequencies. Your redundant nervous system means you need to be killed 4 times to stay dead. Your eyes can't track objects moving faster than 200 kilometers per hour, which is adorable because human athletes can throw objects faster than that." She brought up a display showing human history. "We've killed creatures with natural armor before. We hunted mammoths with pointed sticks. We drove saber-toothed cats to extinction. We've defeated every apex predator our world produced, and trust me, they were scarier than you." The remnants of the Krillian fleet tried to retreat, to jump to hyperspace. They found their drives disabled, navigation computers corrupted by viruses that seemed to rewrite themselves faster than they could be purged. "We call that a logic bomb," a human tech specialist explained cheerfully over open channels. "See, your computer systems are based on quantum entanglement, which is cute, but you never considered someone might entangle a virus with your navigation protocols. Every time you try to jump, the virus gets stronger." Within 6 hours, the Krillian fleet was gone. 3,000 ships reduced to expanding clouds of debris. The greatest military force in the galaxy, defeated by a species that had barely left their own star system a century ago. Commander Vexara stared at the tactical display in numb shock. They destroyed them all, every single ship. But the humans weren't done. The fleet reorganized with mechanical precision, forming up into task forces. Admiral Chen appeared on screen again, but now she was addressing someone else. "Galactic Council, this is Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen. You have observed what we are capable of. The Krillian Empire thought strength gave them the right to genocide. They were wrong. The Zalathi called for help, and you ignored them. You let billions die because you were afraid." Her expression hardened. "We are humanity. We are the children of Earth, born from a death world that taught us to be monsters so we could survive to choose not to be. We extend our protection to the Zalathi and any other species threatened with extinction. Any attack on them is an attack on us." She paused, letting that sink in. "And as you've seen, we have a very human way of responding to attacks." The Council's response was immediate and panicked. Multiple species representatives appeared on screen, all talking at once, some offering apologies, others threats, most just gibberish of fear. Admiral Chen cut them all off. "We're not interested in your politics or your fear. We're going to the Krillian homeworld. We're going to end their ability to wage war on anyone, ever again." And then, she smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Then, we're going to have a long talk about this galactic council that allows genocide." The human fleet jumped to hyperspace as one, leaving behind a debris field that had once been the most feared armada in the galaxy. In their wake, they left questions, fear, and a fundamental shift in the galactic balance of power. On the Zalathi refugee ship, Commander Vex'ara sat in her command chair, processing what she had witnessed. Her communications officer approached hesitantly. "Commander, we're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. 17 species are asking how to contact the humans for protection. The Council is calling emergency sessions. The Krillian subject worlds are already revolting." Vex'ara nodded slowly. "And the humans? Their rear guard left us supplies, medical equipment, and—" He paused. "And a message. What does it say?" The officer's voice was quiet. "It says, 'No one should have to beg for help against genocide. We're sorry we didn't come sooner.'" Vex'ara closed all 6 eyes, finally allowing herself to feel the first stirrings of hope. The Deathworlders had come, and they had brought something the galaxy had never seen before: predators with conscience, monsters with morality, and perhaps most terrifyingly of all, humans with the power to reshape the galaxy and the will to do it. "Set course to follow them," she ordered. "I want to see how this ends." "Commander, the humans are about to deliver judgment on the Krillian homeworld. The galaxy needs witnesses." She stood, all 4 arms steady now. "And perhaps it's time we learned what justice looks like when it comes from a death world." The Krillian homeworld hung in space like a wounded beast, its 3 moons scarred from ancient wars, its surface a patchwork of military installations and fortress cities. For 5,000 years, it had been the heart of an empire built on conquest and fear. Today, it faced something it had never encountered before: judgment. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, 8,000 ships strong. They had picked up reinforcements along the way, vessels that had been too far from Earth to join the initial response. Hospital ships, construction vessels, even civilian transports pressed into service. It was not just a military fleet anymore. It was a statement. In the throne room of the Imperial Palace, Emperor Thrax the Eternal stood before his court. He was the oldest and largest of his species, his natural armor scarred from 1,000 battles, his 4 arms each capable of crushing stone. Around him, his generals and advisors cowered, having heard the reports from the fleet's destruction. "Mighty Emperor," his first general wheezed, still injured from his escape pod's rough landing. "The Deathworlders approach. Our planetary defenses will hold," Thrax interrupted. "For 5 millennia, no enemy has breached our shields. These humans are nothing but clever animals with primitive kinetic weapons." Outside, the human fleet took position. They made no immediate move to attack, instead broadcasting on all frequencies. Admiral Chen's image appeared on every screen, every personal device, every communication system on the planet and its moons. "Citizens of the Krillian Empire," she began, her voice calm but carrying an edge that transcended species. "I am Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Fleet. Your military forces have committed genocide against the Zalathi people. Your government has sanctioned the murder of billions. By any measure of justice, your world should burn." Thrax snarled, but the Admiral continued. "But we are not you. We will not commit genocide to punish genocide. We will not murder children for the sins of their parents. We come not as conquerors, but as judges." She paused, letting her words sink in across the planet. In the cities, Krillian civilians who had never known fear began to feel its cold touch. In the slave camps where conquered species labored, hope sparked for the first time in generations. However, Admiral Chen's voice hardened, justice demands payment. Your empire ends today. Your military will be dismantled. Your slaves will be freed. Your conquered worlds will be returned to their peoples, and those responsible for ordering genocide will face trial. Emperor Thrax's response was predictable. Never. We are Krillians. We are the strong. Fire all weapons. Destroy these arrogant mammals. The planetary defense grid activated. Weapons that could shatter moons powered up, targeting the human fleet. Shields that had never fallen in 5,000 years shimmered to full strength. From hidden bases on the moons, the last reserves of the Krillian Navy launched, desperate to protect their homeworld. The humans responded with something unprecedented. Instead of weapons, they deployed satellites, thousands of them, taking position around the planet and its moons. Each satellite was small, unremarkable, seemingly defenseless. When the Krillian weapons fired, the satellites activated. The massive energy beams struck not the human fleet, but each other, bent and redirected by precisely positioned gravitational fields. The planet's own defenses turned inward, their devastating power neutralized by simple physics and perfect timing. Impossible, Emperor Thrax breathed. No, came a new voice over the communications. A human scientist, her face showing the excitement of someone whose theories were being proven correct. Just difficult. Your weapons are powerful but predictable. We've been modeling gravitational lensing for decades. It was just a matter of scale. The reserve fleet fared no better. Human fighters, piloted by beings who thought nothing of pulling maneuvers at 15 Gs, danced through their formations. Where Krillian doctrine emphasized overwhelming force, humans used precision. Where Krillians relied on their natural strength, humans used technology to multiply theirs 100-fold. But it was what came next that truly broke the Krillian spirit. Drop pods began falling toward the planet, thousands of them, each one containing not soldiers, but something far more dangerous, humans with a purpose. They landed not in the cities, but at the slave camps, the mining facilities, the industrial complexes where billions of conquered beings labored in chains. The recordings from those first hours would be studied for centuries. Human soldiers, each one capable of bench-pressing their own body weight in Earth gravity, tore through chains like tissue paper. Krillian guards, used to dealing with weaker species, found themselves facing beings who could punch through their natural armor, who could run for hours without tiring, who could survive injuries that would kill any civilized species. But it wasn't the violence that was remembered. It was what came after. Human medics treated injured slaves with the same care they would their own. Human engineers began converting weapons factories into hospitals. Human teachers set up schools in the ruins of barracks. For every soldier, there were 2 specialists focused on rebuilding, on healing, on creating something better from the ashes of empire. In the throne room, Emperor Thrax watched his empire crumble in real time. Reports flooded in from across the planet. The slaves were rising, aided by humans who seemed to be everywhere at once. His own people, the civilians who had benefited from the empire but never bloodied their hands, were laying down arms and accepting human protection in exchange for cooperation. "Fight!" he roared at his court. "We are Krillians! We do not surrender!" But his generals were already gone, fled or surrendered. His guards looked at each other uncertainly. From outside came sounds that had never been heard in the palace, the voices of freed slaves, singing. Admiral Chen appeared on his throne room's main screen, no longer addressing the planet, but speaking directly to him. "Emperor Thrax, your empire has fallen, your military is destroyed, your slaves are free, you can die fighting and we will oblige you, or you can surrender and face trial. Choose. Trial? Thrax laughed bitterly. By what right do you judge us? By what law? For the first time, Admiral Chen smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. By the oldest law, Emperor. The law that says those with the strength to protect must do so. The law that says genocide cannot go unanswered. The law written not in books but in the bones of every species that ever looked at the stars and chose to be better than their base nature. She leaned forward. You see, Emperor, that's what you never understood. Strength without justice is just tyranny. Power without compassion is just cruelty. We humans learned that the hard way, through thousands of years of blood and suffering. And now, we're going to teach the galaxy. The palace doors exploded inward, not from weapons fire, but from the press of bodies. Thousands of former slaves, supported by human soldiers, flooded in. Thrax saw species he had conquered decades ago, beings his empire had broken, now standing tall with hope in their eyes and humans at their backs. A single human soldier stepped forward, her armor scarred from battle but her weapon lowered. She was smaller than Thrax by far, probably massing a quarter of what he did. But something in her stance, the casual confidence of a persistent predator, made him step back. Emperor Thrax the Eternal, she said formally, by the authority vested in me by the United Earth Government and witnessed by the free peoples of the galaxy, I place you under arrest for crimes against sapience. You will be held securely and treated humanely until trial. I am the Emperor! Thrax roared, charging with all four arms raised to strike. The human moved, not with the desperate speed of prey, but with the economical precision of a predator. She stepped inside his reach, struck pressure points that Krillian martial arts said didn't exist, and had him on the ground in restraints before his court could blink. No, she said quietly. You were the Emperor. Now you're just another war criminal. Across the planet, similar scenes played out. Not all Krillians resisted. Many, especially the younger generations who had grown up with the Empire's cruelty, but never fully embraced it, welcomed the change. They had lived in fear, too. Fear of their own government, fear of being seen as weak, fear of the endless cycle of violence. The humans were surprisingly gentle with those who surrendered. They understood something the Krillian Empire never had. Today's enemy could be tomorrow's ally, if given reason to change. Within a week, the Krillian homeworld was transformed. The slave camps were gone, replaced by refugee centers where former slaves decided their own fates. Many chose to return to their homeworlds, carried by human ships. Others, those who had been born in captivity and knew no other home, were offered a choice: citizenship on any human colony that would have them. The military installations were not destroyed, but converted. Weapons factories became manufacturing centers for farming equipment. Naval yards that had built warships now produced cargo vessels. The humans supervised but increasingly let Krillians who had proven themselves take over the work. Why? A Krillian engineer asked a human supervisor one day. Why help us rebuild? We were your enemies. The human, a middle-aged woman with gray streaking her hair, smiled sadly. Because we've been where you are. We've been the conquerors, the enslavers, the ones who thought might made right. But we learned slowly and painfully that there's another way. She looked at the factory floor where former slaves and Krillians worked side by side. And because the best revenge against an empire of hate is to build a community of hope. The trials began a month later. Not victor's justice, but a real court with judges from multiple species, including humans. Emperor Thrax and his highest officials faced their crimes, the evidence presented clearly and without passion. The footage of burned worlds, the testimony of survivors, the records kept with bureaucratic precision by the Empire itself. Some were executed, those whose crimes were so vast that no other justice sufficed. But most were sentenced to life imprisonment or decades of labor, rebuilding what they had destroyed. The humans insisted on something that shocked the galaxy. The criminals would be treated humanely, given the same food and medical care as anyone else. Even monsters deserve dignity, Admiral Chen explained to the Galactic Council. Not for their sake, but for ours. The moment we become them, we lose the right to judge them. Commander Vexera of the Zalathi stood before the Galactic Council 6 months after the fall of the Krillian Empire, but this was not the same council that had abandoned her people. Half the seats were empty, their occupants resigned in shame or removed for complicity. New faces filled the chamber, younger, more diverse, including several humans. "The Deathworlders came when we called," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "They brought death, yes, but only to those who dealt in death. They brought destruction, but only to systems of oppression. And then, when the fighting was done, they stayed to heal." She gestured to the human delegation. They could have conquered. With their technology, their tactics, their sheer relentless nature, they could have made themselves our masters. Instead, they made themselves our protectors. A murmur ran through the chamber. The human ambassador, a quiet man who had once been a soldier, stood. "We don't want to rule the galaxy," he said simply. "We want to live in it. We want to explore, to learn, to make friends. But we also remember what it's like to be helpless, to call for help, and hear only silence. Never again." He looked around the chamber. "Earth stands ready to defend any species threatened with extinction. Our fleets will answer any call for help against genocide. This is not a threat, it's a promise." The vote was unanimous. The Galactic Protection Treaty was signed that day, establishing human bases throughout the galaxy, rapid response fleets ready to deploy at the first sign of attempted genocide. The quarantine on Earth was lifted, and for the first time, alien delegations were invited to visit the Death World. Many took up the invitation, curiosity overcoming fear. They found a world that was indeed dangerous, where the weather could kill, where predators still hunted, where the very ground could shake and split. But they also found beauty beyond measure, diversity that defied comprehension, and a species that had turned their struggle for survival into art, music, literature, and dreams of a better future. "Your world is terrifying," a Zalathi diplomat said to her human guide as they stood on a cliff overlooking an ocean that could spawn city-killing storms. "Yes," the human agreed, smiling. "But it's also beautiful. That's what made us what we are. We learned to find beauty in danger, hope in struggle, and strength in unity." She pointed to the sunset painting the sky in impossible colors. "We're children of chaos who chose order, predators who chose compassion, monsters who chose to be more." Years passed. The galaxy changed. Species that had hidden in fear came forward. Civilizations that had stagnated under the threat of conquest began to flourish. Trade routes opened where there had been only military patrols. Art and culture flowed between worlds that had never known anything but isolation. And the humans? They were everywhere and nowhere, the guardians who appeared when needed and vanished when the danger passed. Their ships patrolled the dark spaces between stars, ready to answer any call for help. Their soldiers trained with species they had once fought, teaching them to defend themselves. Their scientists shared knowledge freely, lifting entire civilizations to new heights. They were still Deathworlders, still dangerous, still capable of violence that made other species step back in fear. But they had chosen to be protectors instead of conquerors, teachers instead of tyrants. On the 10th anniversary of the Krillian War, a monument was unveiled on the Zalathi homeworld. It showed a human hand reaching out to a Zalathi hand, pulling them from darkness. But if you looked closer, you could see that the human hand bore scars, old wounds from their own climb out of the dark. The inscription read, "They called for help, And the Deathworlders answered, not with conquest, but with compassion, not with tyranny, but with justice, in memory of those we could not save, in hope for those we still can. Commander Vexara, now an admiral in the combined fleet, stood before the monument with Admiral Chen, both older now but still serving. "Do you regret it?" Vexara asked. "Revealing yourselves? Taking on the burden of protecting the galaxy?" Chen was quiet for a moment. "No. We spent so long learning to be monsters to survive. It's good to remember we learned to be human too." She smiled. "Besides, someone has to be the thing that monsters fear. Might as well be the monsters who chose to be more." In the depths of space, a distress signal echoed. Another species, another crisis, another call for help. And somewhere in the dark, human ships changed course, racing toward those in need. The Deathworlders were coming, and for those who preyed on the innocent, that was the most terrifying news in the galaxy. For everyone else, it was hope. The galaxy had learned a fundamental truth. When you call for help, sometimes you get more than you bargained for. Sometimes you get humans. And while that might be terrifying, it was also the best thing that could happen. Because humans, for all their flaws and dangers, had made a choice. They had chosen to be the shield instead of the sword, the guardian instead of the conqueror. They had looked at the galaxy and decided that their strength meant they had a responsibility to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. And in the end, that was the real judgment the Deathworlders delivered. Not just on the Krillian Empire, but on the entire galaxy. A judgment that said strength without compassion was worthless, that power came with responsibility, and that sometimes the best revenge against darkness was to light a candle and guard it with your life. The Deathworlders had come, and they had changed everything. Not through conquest, but through example. Not through fear, but through hope. And the galaxy would never be the same.